July 18th meeting of the Gardner Planning Board. First item of business is approval of minutes from the June 13th meeting.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the minutes. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. And my thanks to Vice Chairman Schwartz for covering the bases for me while I continue recovering from knee surgery.
You're welcome.
New business. The open space recreation plan.
Mr. Chairman, as the planning board members know, the open space recreation plan is a comprehensive planning document that guides future policies and actions for the city by examining the need for new or improved conservation areas, recreation facilities. We went over the past year, have gone through the process of updating our 2015 plan. Typically, the plans are good for 7 years. Ours expired in August of 2022. The plan is important to have in place because it allows the city to apply for certain grant funding to implement open space recreation projects. We've gotten 2 grants over the past few years for the Bailey Brook Park area to implement phase 1 and 2 up there. I highly recommend that the board and members of the public go to the site and check it out. There's a lot of trails up in that area. We have an outlook over a vast wetland area out on the trail system. We just put in a nice play area for children. There is an adequate parking lot on site also, and it's located off of Leo Drive, down the back side of Leo Drive. There is signage there for people in order to locate it. There's also a pickleball, basketball court at the site. So tonight, I know you were provided with a link to the updated plan. Member Steve Cormier was a member of the committee, or is a member of the committee. Yeah, we're looking for the planning board endorsement of the plan. So if the board would entertain such a motion, it would be appreciated. We'll get a letter from the planning board chair to include in the plan, hopefully along with a letter from the mayor and city council and conservation commission. That's typically what's been done in the past.
Mr. Chairman, I guess.
Mr. Steve.
We've been with the open space recreation plan over the past year and a half between public meetings within the committee, with advice. We've updated the plan with a lot of help from a lot of city departments. I'd like to see us move at this point. I'm hopefully that the planning board will adopt it. And I'd like to put a motion on the floor to accept the open space recreation plan as presented.
I'll second that.
Very good. I have read the plan, and you did a very, very comprehensive job. Bravo and well done. Motion made and seconded that the planning board endorse the open space and recreation plan for further review by the city council and thence the mayor. Any discussion? Hearing none. By voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. And our thanks, the board thanks Mr. Steve Cormier for all his hard work on that committee. Old business, Concord Crossing open space residential development.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Tough to read that. You're not gonna like me.
Mr. Beauregard? Trevor?
Yes, Mr. Chairman?
Would you spin me around so I can see?
Yeah.
Thanks, Wes.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think they're ready.
If you want to review the plan, or
Mr. Chairman, you want to review, want the applicant to review the plan that's in front of the board now? The most recent one that was approved, I mean, submitted, thank you.
He's muted.
Mr. Chairman, you're muted.
Yes, of course I'm on mute. Yes, please. My apologies. Yeah, you can spin through it quickly if you would, please.
yeah, I think probably would make sense for Wes to just go through with the revisions that were made to the previous plan.
So for the record, Wesley Fliss, Haley Ward. So at the last meeting, we talked about some different options, kind of given some, like, hopefully final direction toward what we're looking for. The request was to see if we could make some lots that had more frontage on the property. And so we started to look at that, but also started to look at trying to weigh that and also what the applicant wanted to do, keeping it as a single-family dwellings on all the lots. I know there's some conversation before about, doing single-family and duplexes, but also kind of keeping in harmony with what the applicants wanted to do. And so the plan that we're presenting you this evening, we consider trying to meet, I guess, in the middle with regards to the request, trying to make the frontage, and the request is to see if we can get 100 feet of frontage on these lots, but also to keep the number of units at 76 units, and be at 76 single-family lots. And so to keep the similar road layout that we had before, what we come up with is a 90-foot frontage for all the lots that are shown on the plan, along the straightaways. Obviously along the curves, it's a little bit different. On the curve, it's not a straight 90 feet if you're drawing straight lines along the curve. But the intent there is to create more green space between each of the units. But also keeping the 76 lots was the number that obviously the applicants would like to have, obviously from an economical standpoint, trying to make the development economically feasible also. And so the road layout really hasn't changed from the last time you saw it. We still tried to keep the similar layout with what we had before, where there was the open space behind the units along Century Way and Clark Street. And here, that actually got a little bit bigger in this space here. And the open space actually in here got a little bit bigger also. As part of this, the acreage, I think we were around 4.8 something acres last time. Now we're almost at 5 acres now. I think 4.97 is what we're looking at now. So those two open space parcels got a little bit bigger. And then by decreasing the number of lots from 79 to 76, and some of the lots now are more consistent, they're more uniform regards to the area because of the greater frontage. I was able to create more uniform lots there. Before, some of the lots were between 8 and 12,000 depending where they're located. Now they're a little more uniform where they're closer to the 8,000 square foot number. And because of that, we were also to gain a little more open space in the rear of the property here also. I do show, to meet the requirements of the open space requirement, I do show the 40-foot strip and the location here to get into the open space, and same thing on the bottom locations there, consistent with what the landscape architect had shown originally. And then obviously we show those areas in here as part of the open space for that. But I also do show a number of easements located throughout the development that will also have trails running through those easements between some of the houses to tie into the trails, the existing trail system that's on the property, and to create more of a defined trail system on the property, and tie into the trail system that comes out into here, and some of the trails that come adjacent to the property along the northerly side here on the property. And so that's really again, a conceptual plan, trying to take some of the direction that we were given at the last meeting, but also trying to, I guess, meet the demands of both parties, being the board that you guys asked for, see if we can get more frontage on these lots, but also the demands of the developer, obviously trying to make the project economically viable. And so that's what you see in front of you there. You can see, if you compare the old plan to this one, I think the units are definitely more spread out than they were before. Some of the units were before, we were showing some different or smaller size units. Now we're able to fit, bigger units across the board on all these properties, so that we're maximizing. We look at it as even that as a tax base, I guess, on this, right? If they're building standard colonials instead of a smaller unit on here, now the cost of the units are going to be greater, and the tax revenue that the city will get back on this will be more per lot too. So, but that's kind of the trade-off we're looking at, is where we are now.
Mr. Chairman, you're muted again.
And I apologize, I hit the icon and it does not unstick. Am I back?
Yes.
Yes.
Good, thank you. So this is, I don't know, perhaps our 5th iteration, and we're still seeing an incredibly dense development with relatively small lots. I think what we were trying to get across, and perhaps we didn't do a good job of it, but I think what the board was trying to get across was that we wanted to see larger lots and fewer units. I know you have that 76 number in mind, but if you look at some of the other rural residential 2 developments in that neighborhood, for instance, Brookside Drive north to Leo Drive, which is north of the GR3 zone, you're looking at parcel sizes of 15,000 to 21,000 feet, most closer to the 21,000 side. You get down toward the Leo Drive loop to Fernwood Drive. Parcel sizes to the west of Leo Drive run about 11,000 to 12,000. Couple of 12,000 plus, and some even larger. The characteristics of those previous developments were what we were hoping we would see in yours, as opposed to this incredibly dense development. I think that's what we were trying to get across. Board members, am I way off base here? Your comments, questions?
No, you're exactly right, Mr. Chairman.
I agree. There's not much more we can say to them.
At the last meeting when we talked about the frontage, I did ask the question even if we went to a larger frontage, if it was still okay to do 8,000 square foot lots. And that was the response, it was the frontage that we were more concerned about, not necessarily the area of the lot. And so that's kind of why we considered to keep the lot area the same as what we've been doing. Because the pushback that we kept getting was the green space between the units.
I seem to recall that on every meeting that we've had a presentation from you that Mr. Cormier, Bob Cormier, was the biggest advocate. He was looking for larger lots, and we were all in agreement with that. So, and he did talk about frontage. That was one of those other points that he brought out. But,
Yep, and that's what we did on this plan, we increased the frontage from 80 feet to 90 feet on the
yeah, I
plan.
see that.
And that was, again, the harping point, I think, was the green space between the units, to make sure there's more spacing between the units, and that's what we were trying to accomplish here.
Well, again, we want larger lots and fewer units. You may have to compromise on the number of units that you want to put in there. I don't know what else to say, really.
I don't think it's ever been, I think the discussion of the number of units has come more from the applicant than it has from the board. Obviously, I think the sentiment that's been expressed is that hopefully the density aspect of it was addressed by the landscape architect, which was one of the concerns a few meetings ago. But as far as the number of units, I think what we have to try to get a sense from the board is we've conveyed numbers, but I don't think we've ever heard a number from the board. I think we have a difference. We look, obviously we look at the bylaw a little differently, but I think there has to be some sense, depending on how this thing is laid out. Clearly, we're within the calculations. It's not as if we're at the maximum number or we're at the minimum number. We're probably closer to the minimum number than we are the maximum number.
Yes.
But I don't think that, you know, we can't really look at the project at this stage based on the number of units. Especially because we still have considerable engineering work to do to prove it. So it seems as if the concept plan is what we've been focusing on, but I don't think we have heard a clear number from the board as to what the preference is. So I think we've understood that having the initial number of lots that was proposed was not going to be something that was acceptable. You know, moving off that number by a significant amount of units, somewhere in the 22, 24 range, depending on how you want to count, is a pretty significant amount of units. So now that we've sort of presented a compromise, because I think what we've tried to do right from the get-go is say this is the maximum we can do, you know, can we try to somehow agree to meet somewhere in the middle? That's been the approach, and tonight we're hearing that it's too many. So I don't think we've ever heard that a certain number is too many or a certain number is too few. I know we've talked about lot size, I know we've talked about frontage and things of that nature. But once the landscape architect got involved and we kind of got a flavor of the concern for sighting and green space and things of that nature, this is what we've arrived at.
Well, being as I'm not a civil engineer and none of us are on the board, I assume that larger lots would mean fewer units. That's layman's logic.
Unless they were to use duplexes, yes.
But there's no duplexes in the current plan.
Correct. Because that's not the preferred option for the.
Right.
And so, I guess it goes back to the economics of the development, is when you look at the difference between a single-family unit and a duplex, right, a duplex is gonna sell for less money. And I think what the number we've been told is a quarter, or it's like 25% less than a single family. And you really don't lose number of bedrooms when you use duplexes, you're just losing value in the home. And that really goes back to what's the benefit to the city at that point? Do you wanna have a duplex that you're gonna get less tax money on, but not less bedrooms? I mean, from both parties, the developer would rather have single family, but wouldn't the city rather have single family units? if you're gonna end up having this, similar number of units, wouldn't you rather have single family from an economic standpoint or a tax standpoint if you're looking at the same number of bedrooms? If a duplex has 3 bedrooms and a single family has 3 bedrooms, wouldn't you wanna have more tax money? And so, there's an economic standpoint right here that the developers are looking at. I mean, I raised the point, I think, 3 meetings ago. I asked the city, when is the last time the subdivision was done in the city?
But I think if we were before you tonight with a special permit application, I think one of the things that I have said a few times is, I don't think it's really appropriate to get hung up on a number, because we are following the bylaw, and when you read the bylaw, it gives you the minimum requirements. And what it does say is, the following requirements shall be observed. Where appropriate, the planning board may impose additional requirements upon the tract of land. So, we're well within the minimum requirements. We exceed all of the minimum requirements. It kind of defeats the purpose of us continually coming down when we're not sure where the floor is.
How do you exceed the minimum requirements?
It's very simple, Trevor. Minimum lot area, not less than 8,000 square feet. Minimum frontage, not less than 50. Minimum lot width, not less than 50. Minimum front yard, no building or structure shall be located within 45 feet of a pre-existing street or within 15 feet of a new street. Minimum side yard, not less than 10. We clearly meet those and exceed them. We're not talking, 8,000 square foot lots with 50 feet of frontage.
No, but you're talking 8,000 square foot lots, and I think that's one of the points that the board was getting at throughout this whole process. That's the minimum size, and they'd like to see something more consistent with the neighborhood around this development, like the other open space recreation development that was approved down there, which the chairman read off the size of those lots. You're minimizing the open space that's being provided within the subdivision itself. So I just, I think all along, one of the hangups for the board has been density. And you're giving 10-foot more of frontage along all the lots does not lessen the density of the project. It's still a very dense project, and I think that's their point, so. I think
Well,
we're
it
hoping to
is
see
it is a very large tract of land. We're talking almost 90 acres of land. It is an open space proposal. We've been at this for, a few years now.
Yes.
And I think, as I've said, what's been expressed to me is this area back here, because of the location of the trails, the water resources, things of that nature, it's kind of been, this back area has kind of been not necessarily off limits, but the preference was to stay as far away as that as you can. So we have tried several iterations, obviously, and we're trying to, within the spirit of the bylaw, address the concerns that the board has raised. We feel we've done a pretty good job from where we've started. And hopefully we can get a better sense from the board, whether it happened tonight or if it happened with an application. The process is going to start, so.
Again, I don't see.
Well, again,
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
no, that's all right, go ahead, Mr. Beauregard.
No, I just don't see the change. I mean, it's great that you came up with the 10 more feet for frontage, which I didn't necessarily see on this plan, so it was good to hear that tonight. But looking at the plan and seeing all the 8,000 square foot lots, and the number's still at 76, I think is not consistent with what the board has been asking for all along.
If I could just, Mr. Beauregard, too, is one thing that, we talked about from day one is, and Peter kind of mentioned it, is the maximum number of units allowed under this development is 93.
You could never fit that in that lot.
We actually showed you a plan that could fit 93. If we wanted to do duplexes, we could easily fit 93 units on.
Or if you do, yeah, if you did
If we wanted to do a mix of both,
duplexes, yeah, but you never did a plan with duplexes, you had 93 parcels
Because,
on the lot,
well,
but that's, you could never fit that on the lot, Wes, and make the 50% open space requirements.
if we want to do more duplexes, we could, but the intent of the developer is not to
I'm
do
saying
duplexes.
lots, parcels, you're not,
Well,
you're not.
The calculation doesn't say lots.
The plan that you presented to the board back in February of '21 showed 93 parcels and 92 parcels.
But we've
You could never
also,
fit, you could never fit 92 parcels on this piece of land and
But the-
meet the
yeah,
open space requirements.
but the regulations don't say lots, it says units.
I know that.
And so that's what I'm saying, is we
What
could
I'm
do
saying
more
is the plan that
duplexes.
you presented to the, had 92 lots.
Yeah, we've shown 10 different plans.
So
We've done.
as I said, we get it, we hear, and believe it or not, we do understand that what we're arguing over is the number that's gonna actually end up there. We've tried to present numbers, we have heard, somewhere in the 70s it seemed to be okay. We don't know how much larger and how much of a reduction the town would actually think is acceptable. And I'm not sure that the planning board would probably want to put us in that type of a position, because you're in the same position we are, okay? This is a concept plan. It's not the actual plan. So we still have to come in with the actual plan and discuss that. Maybe those discussions will be a little more directed or pointed, but we've got to start somewhere, right? And it doesn't seem to make sense for the developer or proponent to come in with something that does comply to keep going the other way. So it just seems to make sense that we start the process, so we might be able to clear it and come to a better understanding as to what might be acceptable and not acceptable. It's difficult to get a sense because the pushback on the proposal has been expressed not just at this board, but other boards and in the city as well. So it's not like we're not trying. We are trying to stay within the confines of the bylaw. We think we've done that. We keep hearing density. Obviously, an argument can be made that this is clearly less dense than the initial 76 unit project that was brought in, with the adjustments that were made based on the frontage and with the landscape architect. So,
Peter, what did the landscape architect do?
he
What was
changed
his-
the curvatures of the road. It's hard to see.
His was more compressed, similar to what the original plan was.
Yeah.
Because he was trying to maximize the amount of open space, not have open space in the middle.
And I think his biggest contribution, if you would, is the way the roads are gonna sort of be windy and have curvatures so that it changes the eyesight every now and then after so many feet.
And I guess the one comment I'd like to make too is, we're doing open space residential development, which is, right, cluster development, right? Cluster development's gonna be denser within the area that we develop. If we're using the whole amount of area, then yeah, the unit's gonna be spread out. I think that's the whole intent of the cluster, right, is to minimize the road construction, minimize all the development into one small area. So if we continue to make the road frontage up to 100 feet or 120 feet, it kind of goes away from the spirit of a cluster development.
Yeah, not necessarily.
I'd have to,
So if you were to do a
disagree.
traditional subdivision on this lot right here,
Yep.
on this lot,
Yep.
you might get 46 parcels in there. And
66
so,
units is what we had.
what's that?
66 units is what we had.
You had 46 single-family lots on the large parcel,
And then 10
on,
duplexes.
in general residential 3, yeah.
Yep.
Duplexes on it, you get.
Yep, which
21
we're
units.
including
So,
some of those
But
lots.
if you look at this one single lot, the larger lot where you're doing the open space residential development, you get 46 parcels on that.
46 lots, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you're asking the board for 70% more parcels in an open space residential development where you're putting in less roadway, less water, less sewer, right?
Well, we're also including some of the area that we were including in that plan, not developing this land here as part of this development.
Yeah.
Obviously, if they want to come in and develop this land, well, then they're gonna get more units out of that property. And so that's why, kind of a trade-off is we're not looking to develop this land also. We know we can't include it as part of your open space calculations, but we are including it as part of that proposal. And that's why we're saying we're going from 66 units to 76 units, and instead of 93. And so we think we're coming closer to the 66 units than we are to the 93 units with 76. And in the last plan, we showed 79, so we did lose 3 units even from the last plan, or 3 lots from the last plan, by making the frontage bigger.
But you haven't made the parcels bigger.
We made them wider. I don't know if we have a recording, but I asked the question at the end of the meeting. I said, if we make the frontage bigger, does it matter if we make the lot area bigger? The answer was no. I asked the question for a reason, because I knew I had to draw the plan. If
Right.
I was told I want 100 by 100, well, then I know what I have to make
I
the
think it was
frontage for.
very clearly stated through all the meetings that the planning board is looking for larger lots, a less dense development. Whether you increase the frontage, great idea, that's one way of doing it, or you increase the depth of the lot, there's another way of doing it. You can ask all the questions you want.
But I'm just going by the
Bottom
answer I was
line
given.
is, it's been clear all along. They're looking for larger lots and less dense development, consistent with the other parcels or.
I'm just going by the answer I was given, that's all, Trevor. The answer I was given was it was the frontage, that was the big question at the last meeting. I asked the question specifically for that reason. And the answer I was given was
You
no.
brought it up, you kept on bringing up the frontage.
I didn't bring up the frontage, I didn't. Listen, I was fine with an 80-foot frontage plan,
Yeah, okay.
because that's the developable land that the applicant asked for, was 80-foot frontage lots. Mr. Cormier was the one that kept saying, I want more frontage, I want more green space between the units. And so that's why I asked the question at the last meeting, lot size. But whatever it is, we know what you're asking for now, but I think Mr. Campabasso kind of asked the question, is there a number of units that the board, I mean, is there a number in your head? Because we need to know that answer too. At some point, I mean, I could draw 20 more plans. It's no fair to my clients to draw 20 more plans.
You know, and every one of those 20 plans is gonna have 76 parcels on it. I mean,
Well-
that's what the board's seen since day one.
Yes,
Since-
because there's an
since
economics
the
behind the
board-
project, yeah.
Well,
There's a,
yeah, but I mean, if you look at a
So-
traditional development, you got 46 lots in this parcel. How do you make the economics work with that? If you can't make the economics work with something less than 76, doesn't make any sense to me.
and Mr.
I'm not
Campabasso,
a developer, but.
well, and that's why nobody's developing this piece of property with a conventional subdivision. How long has this been vacant for? You saw our plan from, CNC that came in, what, 15, 20 years ago now?
In the 2000s, right?
Right, so why has this been vacant? Why has no other residential subdivisions in Gardner been constructed? Because the cost does not outweigh the construction cost in Gardner, unless you do a cluster subdivision.
Yeah.
And that's the way you have to do it. If this was in Westminster, the cost would probably make more sense to do 50 lots here, and they could probably make the numbers work, right? But when they look at economics of doing the development in this city, right, they have to make sure the economics work. And that's the point we're just trying to make the board aware of, is we've gone back
I
and
don't-
forth with numbers.
I don't have the dimensional requirements for the underlying bylaw. Do we have those here?
60,000 square feet, 100 foot, 150 feet of frontage. I'd go grab them. I don't have them
Okay.
with me. I can go grab them.
Thank you.
I can't see it. Has he left the room?
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
So it's 60,000 square foot lots, 150 foot of frontage. Front setback 30, side setback 20, rear 40. 70% open space requirement. Excuse me.
to Wes's point, obviously, the objective of an open space development is different from a traditional development. And if one of the main purposes is to protect open space and protect potential municipal water supplies, that's kind of what Harbor Classic has tried to focus on. If the minimum number of lots that could be done is 46, if I'm hearing you correctly.
That's what your plans
Well,
shows.
and
On that parcel.
I'd have to disagree with that, because there's nowhere in the regulation that says there's a minimum number of lots.
No, I'm talking, I think what we've been struggling with, okay, is the differences in the bylaw and the requirements with coming in, what are we supposed to come in with, okay? Clearly, there's a difference, I think there's a difference of opinion on what the interpretation of the bylaw is. I guess we could keep arguing about that, but that's not gonna do my clients any good, and it's not going to do the board any good. We're not here to try to cause, any type of adversarial process or give this much angst, I guess. But I think in some of the presentations, we've acknowledged, okay, well, is 46 the number? Because that's what we think it could be. But we don't really know, because we haven't really done hard engineering. So that's my point. We're talking about numbers from a concept standpoint that could very well change, that ultimately, once the actual engineering gets done, may very well change. So we're getting hung up on talking about number of units, number of houses, and I think we have to pay attention to that, because obviously we can't come in here and propose 100 units. Clearly that would exceed the regulations. But I don't think there should be an expectation that a proponent come in with something less than what makes sense, or less than what the bylaw would allow. So we have to at least try to work towards something along those lines. I think Harbor Classic, between the engineering, all the work, they've done that. And based on what has taken place, I think tonight we're probably getting a much stronger message that it's too dense, because the lots are too small.
Right.
And it's not so much the number of units. I think what we're hearing is the lot size is too small.
Correct.
So that's why I think I'll go to my point. It doesn't make sense for us to try to keep shooting dots at a dartboard, and please don't take offense to that. But, the more specific feedback we get, the more specific the plan will be. Because if you asked us to put, let's say, 66 lots on there, then that's gonna change the layout, it's gonna change the design, it's gonna change the way things work. So, I don't wanna come across as, we shouldn't be trying to point fingers and have this become an adversarial. That's not what the intent of the pre-application discussions are. The intent is to sit down, look at options, and get some idea as to what the comfort zone is. If we're far off, if we're close, if we're somewhere, where the board's not gonna be falling off their chairs, great. But if, at some point, we have to have more concreteness to come in with a plan that the board's gonna find acceptable. And it might take the actual public hearing process to do that, because we have gone back and forth quite a bit. And I think now, the frontage issue aside, if it's just the very size of the lots, that's a different issue, but instead of saying, we said it, we didn't say it, and what our understandings were, okay. we'll have to see if we can address that.
Okay, well, please understand that this board has no particular or any animus towards your client or any developer that comes before us. We wish them all the luck in the world with their project. There've been a little bit of communication hitches here and there in this process. Again, as far as lot size goes, I keep going back to the other developments that are within the rural residential 2 zones, and the lots are much larger than what you propose. As I already cited, 15,000, 21,000, et cetera. That's what I'm trying to get across. I brought units into it, perhaps I shouldn't have. However, I still see it as too dense. Now, having said that, we can iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate and keep fine tuning it at your client's expense and our time. Or you can submit a preliminary subdivision plan, and Mr. Beauregard, catch me if I'm wrong on process here. You can submit a preliminary subdivision plan and at least take one more step forward. Am I correct on process, Mr. Beauregard? I get hung up on that sometimes.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would recommend the initial process be a preliminary subdivision plan. And if and when the planning board approves that plan, then submit the definitive plan with the special permit application. Because the special permit, I don't think the board's gonna have adequate information with a preliminary plan to approve a special permit. And I also think that the process for a definitive plan and a special permit application kind of coincide as far as timelines concerned, public hearing, time for the planning board to submit a response, and so forth. So I think that's probably the best way to go about it. And that was my initial assessment, I think back a few meetings ago, and it was also in my notes from 2021 when I went through this process originally. I think that's the best way to go. That's what I would recommend if the applicant is gonna move forward.
Okay, I'll go through that, and hopefully we can sort of agree on the process, and we can start. It seems to make sense.
Yeah, start with the preliminary subdivision plan, so at least you can move forward, rather than ceaseless iteration.
And there's a public meeting, sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, there's a public meeting associated with that process too, so we can start getting the public input also on the preliminary plan.
The only thing that I think we're gonna probably need some clarification on is the open space residential special permit doesn't require a preliminary subdivision plan. And I think the preliminary subdivision plan would have to be a plan that shows a traditional subdivision. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear on that, and that's a couple of the things we're going to have to discuss so that we make sure we come in with the right thing. And I think what we have to try to understand is it's not that this is a difficult project to present. It's when you really dig into the regulations, it's a difficult project for an applicant to submit, because there are so many stages where so many hurdles can come up, and one process can prevent the other process from going forward. One process can stall or delay another process that may have been approved. It becomes very difficult to navigate through all of those requirements. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to be cognizant of, because we want to try to present as best a proposal as we can, knowing that there are several layers of this that has to happen. So I just wanna make sure that when we start to come in, we're coming in somewhere where there's an idea that the board is understanding what we're presenting and why. We might disagree on the final result, but I think at least it'll be a good way to start.
I would strongly urge you to maintain liaison with Mr. Beauregard's office and let him be your lodestone for process. He would be invaluable to you as a resource to navigate process.
I have been in touch with Trevor, and I'm sure I'll continue to be in touch with Trevor.
Oh, I'm not saying you haven't, I just wanted to emphasize that.
No, I know.
And I'm not privy to how many discussions you have with the director's office, so.
That's fine, I understand.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask a question. How many
Is that
lots?
Mr. Betez?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, please, Bob, thank you.
How many lots would fit in this parcel of land if you followed the general zoning regulations?
I believe the number of lots would be 56. When you incorporate the RR2 land, the GR3 and the SFR1.
It'd be 46 on a large lot, and you get 10 more, I believe, or 8 or 10, 10 more in the general residential 3 zoning.
So if we want to focus on just this, it would be 46, excuse me.
And Attorney Campbell also stated that it's, you know, that's a very conceptual plan. There's really no engineering that's been done, so as far as, it could go down,
Right.
actually, once you do all the engineering and layout and do the topography and wetlands and things.
Right, because the reality is, once you design the roadways, you have to have correctly sized detention basins, and there's a lot to it. And depending on the open space that would be needed, and depending on, you know, the stormwater and all that stuff, it's hard to say. So from a purely conceptual standpoint, yeah, that would be the number. Would that be the final number? It would be somewhere around there, but we don't really know what the final number would be. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Anything else from the board members? All right, gentlemen, once again, I thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll follow up with you so we can.
All right, next up, do you have any mop-up items, Mr. Beauregard, before we talk about next meeting?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right, very good. Next meeting, Tuesday, August 8th, at 6:30 PM.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman?
Very true for everyone?
Yes. So I'll be traveling that week and the week after. So we may have to look at rescheduling the August meeting, probably to the end of the month, if we're gonna have one.
Okay, well, keep us posted.
Later in the month?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I'm thinking probably, 22nd. '22nd at the earliest.
Okay, I don't have a problem with that. I don't know.
You can make it the 22nd?
Yeah, we can now if you want, if everybody wants to confirm.
You guys all set?
You know, 22nd?
What's
22nd?
that?
our next meeting, instead of having it on the 8th, having it on the 22nd.
Of August,
Yeah.
as far as I know.
Are
I
you
don't-
traveling anywhere or
I
anything?
don't have- no.
Okay. We'll follow up with you anyways. Chris will follow up with an email.
No, I think that's okay with me.
Okay. Rob?
Should be fine.
Let me look. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, good.
You need a poll.
22nd it
All
is.
right, good.
22nd.
All right, we'll stand by for the next meeting notice then. All right then, that's it. I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion, we adjourn?
Second.
Get well, Mr.
Motion
Chairman.
made. Sorry?
I say get well, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, I appreciate that. I'll be back on my feet sooner or later. Motion made and seconded to adjourn. Any discussion? Hearing none, by voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark.